for problems, and the solutions are local. They're lococentric. They are nougacentric, and that's why though I don't have a doctorate, I have only a master's degree in English. I like to say, kiddingly, that I'm Dr. Nougacentric, the professor of nougacentrism, where we have the vain and whimsical idea that somehow because we're here, you and I are here for the moment. It is the center of the world for all of us, and it matters most to us, and it is more important to us, I would say for God's glory, than what happens in Washington matters to us, or what happens in Nashville matters to us for good, of course, or for evil, right? Those faraway places tend to make things more difficult, and because they are kind of a vacuum cleaner of capital, they suck capital and they suck wealth out of the rest of the country for their hangers-on and their political insiders. We are only damaged by them. We can only be damaged by Washington. We can only be damaged by presidents, by Congress, by regulatory agencies, and even governors. Governors are really not looking out for us. They are maintenance holders, maintenance keepers, maintainers of the status quo, which is not prosperous, not free, and which is all about keeping cartels in operation and sort of hiding the fact that we are their subject. We are the subjects of cartels, whether it's in insurance or state governments or utilities. Why does it cost so much to have a phone, right? There's not really a lot of competition, though there seems to be in many markets. There's competition, but because there is a regulatory reality, these parties that get in good, get in big, make their way without a free market, and so there is competition, but it's not a free market. We have always the government there as the key player in many areas, and the people such as Phil Bredesen make their millions on government subsidized, government backed, government tax break supported industries, and you and I, well, we just work for a living, right? And so that's why we're having a hard time keeping up expenses. Our expenses keep going higher, especially for medical services, highly inflated market because it's not a free market. And if you, my listener, have children and you're facing the threat of a daughter or son going into the university, you think, oh, well, how can I pay for that? Well, or I can't. So, well, you'll just have to get a loan. And the idea of having your son or daughter indentured frightens you. But since everybody does it, you don't really feel it as fright. You just feel it as a kind of annoying, uncomfortable reality that you are wise enough and smart enough to face, right? And so you're just going to say, well, I can help you with the form, and I'll give you my financial data so you can submit that to the guarantor of your debt as you go into college. And you're uneasy, but that's just the way things are. You think that's just how things are. And so we have a national economy and international economy all based on debt and all controlled by cartels. And the biggest cartel, of course, is the Federal Reserve System. And so we think, how do we solve our problems locally? How do I solve my personal problems? Now, one thing I would like to offer to you, my listener, is that you call and we talk about some problem that you have. Well, maybe you have a problem with a neighbor. Maybe you have a legal problem. Maybe you have a problem with the police. Maybe there's something that you want to discuss. So feel free to call. The solution we offer in our rhetoric here on the David Tula Show, we offer a kind of a generalized outlook of lococentrism and local solutions to national problems. I say they're really local problems, but they have an origin in a national insurance-oriented perspective, right? A security-oriented, safety-oriented, regulatory-oriented perspective. And that exists to keep you safe, right? And so these machines, these legal structures play on fear, and they prey on your fear. And so they're offering solutions, right? They're offering solutions to your fear problem and security, right? The greatest motivator in mankind is not love, it's fear. Even God uses fear. There's probably double the number of references to fear and the like in the scriptures than there is to love. And fear is a great motivator. Now, the question is to fear the right thing, or am I fearing the wrong thing? And I like to suggest that it's better to fear the right thing, that would be the wrath of God, than the wrong, that would be the wrath of man, or the lack of support of man, or the lack of approval of man. Those are all fears that invest the hearts of many people. You probably know some of them, you, my listener, and so we're not a confident people anymore, and we're deeply in hock, and we're deeply resentful of perhaps the idea that we can be independent, we can do things on our own. We don't need to have the public school to train and educate our children. Though, and you, my listener, let's say you're a man who goes to church. You've never heard anything from your pulpit about God's claims on your children. You just haven't heard it, and you've never been given the wherewithal from what you've heard in sermons and Sunday school discussion about your duty. Never heard it, and so you've simply done the default thing. That's go to public school. Your family putting 2 or 3 children in the system that has 43,000 other children in it too. So you're in good company, right? So is it a problem? Is public school a problem, or is it just our safety and our security? Is it a blessing? And because we can't answer these questions correctly, I suggest we are fearful people. We don't know about the free market. We don't trust other people. In my analysis, I believe in the fall. I believe in sin, the sin nature, and I believe, as John Calvin rightly expounds the scriptures, that our fall is total. Right? There's a total fall, and man is completely corrupted himself. And yet, having that view of mankind, that he's as low as a worm, right? The Christian analysis is, on the other hand, it highly, highly esteems him. Man is required to do great things. He has a great and wonderful future ahead, right? That's called an optimistic eschatology. Very few Christian people have that. They're very pessimistic in their thinking of the future. They're not building anything. Theirs is largely a holding action, right? They're in their Christian ghetto, and they're not conquering anything. They have nothing to say about any of the world's institutions that are indeed in crisis mode. And for example, the idea of the state prison system. When's the last time you heard a sermon about that? When's the last time you've heard a condemnation from the pulpit about the very fact that Tennessee has a prison system, and it's constitutional, right? It's in the Constitution that we have that. It's in the Constitution that we have a public school. Does any Christian analysis that you've encountered give you the wherewithal to see that it is part of your fear, right? Because you live in fear. You have to live in fear. You have to be helpless. You need prisons. You need schools. Now, we hear about the school to prison pipeline. I was not going to evoke that here, but there is something to that, right? And because we live in fear and don't have belief in a God who has authority over all these areas, we just have to constantly react, and we are a fearful people. We are a fearful people, and that's why I like to highlight when I can in my reporting at yournews.com and at Nuganomics, and here on the show, reporting about people such as Carol Gaddy in Dunlap in Ray County, who fought for 2.5 years her right to live in her house without being searched or seized without a warrant. A very courageous woman who stood on principle. And though I called her last night and I said, "Well, Carol, what's your situation?" She said, "Well, we're halfway through." And I thought that when she got out of jail last year in September, that when she was freed from jail in the compromise, that was all over, that she had won her position, vindicated her house, given by a third-party engineer, given a 100% clean bill of health, that ended the city's claims against her, right? The city had been trying to search her house without a warrant on a municipal necessity theory, one placed in the wrong court, and making allegations that were simply untenable legally. And she fought back. She fought back for 2.5 years. And so we need people like her. And I offer my reporting on such people and people such as Hanson Melvin here in Chattanooga as exemplars, right? They are examples to us. They are belligerent claimants in person. They're going to stand on their ground. They're going to stand on their rights. and they're doing that because they exhibit the confidence that the Christian people should have. And both of those, as I mentioned, are Christian people. They have belief in God, and they have fear of God and less fear of man than others. Most people fear men, and so do not stand on their rights. Their rights, if they don't assert them, simply don't exist. And that's an important point to remember. 800-8949, 800-8949. David Tool is brought to you by yournews.com. I argue that near is better than far, that small is better than big, and simple than complex. And in the footnotes at 5-point type, in Helvetica type, again, without the serifs, without the little blades, personal is better than corporate and physical than abstract. Like us on Facebook. We're live on Facebook, by the way, and also live on TuneIn Radio. TuneIn Radio is an app that you have on your phone. Just load that on. It's a couple megabytes, and then make us your favorite station. And caller, you're live on the air with David Toulis. What's on your mind? What problems do you have that we can discuss? Well, this is David Toulis, and we're brought to you by yournews.com, 800-8949, 800-8949. That is the number. And if I've messed you up by not getting you through, forgive me. We do want to look at local problems. One of my main arguments in the larger context of your capital is divesting national and investing local. Invest locally, invest in your own business. Now, I want to look at some of the barriers to capitalization here in Chattanooga. Caller, you're live on the air. What's on your mind? We have one of the chief obstacles to prosperity is, I would say, fear. You know, when you don't have a stable legal environment, it's hard to invest. When you have a lot of uncertainty caused by government favor in the marketplace and cartels, it's also you lack stability and you lack certainty. So that also is a damper on investment, a damper on the optimism and confidence that people have to start businesses, to invest in businesses. I was talking with a man yesterday, just by the way, trying to get to the governor's race, about investing in his business. He says, well, he's working for a rehabber. And caller, you're live on the air. What's on your mind?
Yeah, I think for the new listeners of Nooga Radio that weren't around during the AM days of David Toulis, to remind them of how you helped the Gaddies. When she was under arrest, they arrested her because she wouldn't give in to an unconstitutional, illegal search from government. And also Melvin Hanson.
Melvin.
So illegally arrested. So, I'm sure, David, if people are being abused and they contact you, you'll go to bat for them. But I just want to say one thing about what government does. These people get paid 8 hours a day to harass individuals. They don't go away, especially if you poke a finger in their eye. So you have to be bold enough to stand up to them and go, listen, jackass. No. The answer is no. And by the way, they're not conservatives doing this. You can't, just because you say you're a conservative doesn't mean you are. Conservative conserves the Constitution, believes in the rule of law. So I'm going to have to disagree with you on saying conservatives are involved in what you say they're involved in. They may claim to be conservatives, but they're not. So remember, when you go up against thugs, you have to stick your finger in their eye and say no. Because, David, what they're going to do is at their front desk, they're going to have some pretty little girl, some pretty little bureaucrat taking your complaint while they're screwing you from behind the scenes. So I have very little respect for all levels of government, local, state, regional, or federal, because I've dealt with them for 40 years. Thanks.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate that. A very stern warning from Confederate Mike about trusting government and being deluded by the friendly person at the front desk, while behind the scenes the officials are trying to impose an ultra virus against you. The word ultra virus, by the way, means outside the view, outside. There's a major problem with the modern state. It has many rules that it imposes upon the people, but it often exempts itself. And my whole transportation administrative notice project, which sounds like a real bore, but is in fact very exciting, has in view the abusive enforcement of a statute that is narrower in scope than the practice suggests. The practice suggests that all, just in a nutshell, that all use of the highway and roadway, which belong to the people, is transportation, but it's really not. It's all, in fact, it's all travel, but transportation is simply a subcategory of it, and that is to say, the for-profit use of the road. That's what's hired. That's what's regulated, because those people are employees. They are drivers and operators, and they're involved in the for-profit use of the road, subject to regulation and the police on account of the public interest in their activities. Now, the governor's race requires some militant questions. I mentioned civil asset forfeiture, and I would say the candidates such as Randy Boyd and Diane Black. Do you believe? Perhaps the main question is: do you believe in judicial supremacy, or do you believe in constitutional supremacy? That's the main question. If you go to yournews.com today, you can read these queries militant for TN governor candidates. And the main question is, do you care for liberty and freedom? These are not questions that are generally asked. And the reason the press doesn't generally ask them is because there's really not coverage on these points. It's hard to ask the questions if you don't get some stimuli in that direction. So here's another one, and we live in a pro-life state, right? We have a pro-life governor, we have a pro-life attorney general, and the Republican majority generally pro-life in the General Assembly. But in 2015, 9,000 boys and girls were destroyed by the permission of these parties, right? The Republican Party and the Democrat Party. Should not this slaughter be abolished? Should not we abolish it? Where are the Christian people to ask for that? Christian people say they're pro-life, but where are the Christian people who are for abolition? Do we want the killing of children to be regulated, or do we want it to be abolished? The measure in the General Assembly, I think the governor will probably sign it, to defund Planned Parenthood in its default receipt of state money. That's pro-life, okay, and that's fine, but that should not be satisfactory. It should not be enough. Does constitutional government number 3, I guess we could say, does it envision the state of Tennessee engaging in any business relationships at all? We have TN Invesco. It has doled out $200 million in tax credits. It's losing money. And according to, I think Tennessean had this figure, the state gives about $2.5 billion in breaks and favors to big business, right? Big business. And that, of course, is fuel, is fertile ground for cronyism and insiderism, favoritism. It's also called corruption. That's what happens, is official corruption. It happens is a matter of state policy, right? It's a matter. This is what we do. We bring business to Chattanooga. We're pro-business. Well, the government should not be pro-business. It should be pro-free market. That's why I, your host here, David Toulos, I'm not pro-business. Okay, I'm pro-free market, because if you're pro-free market, you're pro-business for everybody equally, without turning your back on the man who doesn't have the advantage of a state connection, right? A state contract, a state favor, a state handout, right? A special break. The government is selling insurance contracts and funding its operation in the marketplace. The government has no authority to enter into business relationships with anybody, and the constitutional ban is not enforced. It's simply not enforced. Why not? Why do governor candidates not bring this up? Well, because they are part of that system, right? They're part of that system. Does the state of Tennessee, I would ask next, plan to continue with the drug war, assisting the federal government in its war on people and its war on liberty? Rulings in the high court are routinely ignored. And I'm thinking here again of Chattanooga versus Davis, that limits city's authority to do certain things. And this is a question on the legal authority of a police department, whether in Soddy Daisy or in Chattanooga or in East Ridge, that authority to enforce anything other than the specific grants in statute, which I don't think it includes Title 39, which is the criminal volume, right? I don't believe it's there. Now, I could be wrong about that, but I've read Chattanooga versus Davis and Chattanooga versus Myers enough to think that this is prohibited, and yet it goes on it goes on, and that is a system that will not be overturned probably ever. It's just the way things are, and it won't be overturned because to do so would be an admission, a legally actionable admission of something that would be it would create a backlog of appeals that would clog the courts for 10 years. Now, the General Assembly has wisely killed the Hall income tax, again, the tax on wages, on not wages, but on bank interest and dividends. That's good. Is the state, what if you're the governor, what are you going to do to promote that? That's very important to promote that. As Diane Black in her op-ed piece with Arthur Laffer promotes the idea of it being a low tax state. Very good, very good. Will you be involved in getting that word out? Now, what about public schools? The Constitution allows public schools, but they come from an older era, right? They are from the 19th century provisions in the Constitution that we should have a free public school. If we have the internet, should not we repeal that provision and get out of the school business entirely? Schooling is a business, and should the state act with its very high cost system, act as if schooling and knowledge and wisdom were extremely rare and expensive, because it costs more than $10,000 per student to have a public school system. The real cost in the free market sector will be a couple $1,000s, maybe $3,000 or $4,000 at a high-end school per year. It can be done very inexpensively, and if there's competition, prices would go down even more. And you wouldn't have to have a very capital-intensive physical plant, right? When you have private dealings, the private sector will always find the least expensive way of getting people together in the same room, if that's important, and it is for many things. That can be done without having vast capital outlays and issuing bonds to pay for school facilities. What about the right to bear arms? Now, that's another important one, and there the governor needs to take the side of the people and not follow the lead of the Attorney General, who is enforcing an unconstitutionally vague statute, which is unconstitutional. Is not only vague, it's clearly out of step with the Constitution. The Constitution allows the state to regulate the wearing of arms, and yet the statute written against black people, it was written after the Nat Turner Rebellion. The whole concept of banning weapons in Tennessee came from the uproar and fear and terror of black people after the 1831 rebellion in Virginia. That is still on the books, and what is banned are all weapons, but there are exceptions, and the honeycomb of exceptions are traps. They're legal traps, and the regulation goes well beyond the wearing of arms. The wearing of arms is having it on your person like a watch or a belt, right? You wear those, and the assembly, I would grant this much, has the authority to regulate the wearing, but not anything beyond that. So what if you have a gun in your car? That should be free. What about a gun in your business? Again, outside the scope. We have governor candidates who have not said the first word about this. One remedy would be constitutional carry. Republicans are very bad about this. Todd Gardenhire shot it down a couple of years ago. Very bad action in committee. Todd Gardenhire shot it down. So we haven't had it. Again, it's a promise maybe for the future. Will Republicans accept that right and accept that you have that right? David Toulis here, 92.7, live on Facebook, live on YouTube. And now some important messages.
Chattanooga Morning News with Russ and Val. Weekdays.